right, everyone. Welcome to the My K12 Career Show. And our special guest for today is Dr. Latania Marr Y Ortega. Dr. Latania is now working as the first ESL coordinator for the Manhattan School District, USD 383 in Manhattan, Kansas. Not just elementary. Do they have one for elementary?
Yeah, she did K through 12, and now they had to hire me on. They hired me on to do 6 through 12 because it was a big feat for her. So
that's good.
It's an honor, though.
Yeah, and she's got some help, so that's really good. I'm sure she's excited.
Yeah.
Dr. Latania also has her doctorate in education and curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in culture and language at K-State. She has an MA in language, literacy, and sociocultural studies with an emphasis in bilingual education. And she has a BA in elementary ed with a minor in bilingual and TESOL and sociology from New Mexico Highlands University. Dr. Latania comes from a family of educators where both her mother and her father worked in the K-12 profession. Dr. Latania, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for coming on the show. What's going on in your life and in your K-12 career right now?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show. Well, I'm finished my doctorate in May, and I applied. That was a feat in itself, finished in May, and I decided I was going to go back into the K through 12. I was thinking of going into academia, and I decided, you know what, I miss the kids. I miss being around children. Let's see how I can use my degree to make a difference. And I decided to go back into the schools, and I applied for this position, which is ESOL Coordinator, grades 6 through 12. So I take care right now of 3 schools. We also have our virtual academy, and Manhattan has its own high school, and we only have, the one school with the different feeder schools. But and so I really have been working hard as to how do we change the language from to an asset perspective language in the way in which we work with our emergent bilinguals. Emergent bilinguals, usually, again, we use EL across the country, English learners. And how do we change the paradigm in the way in which we talk about our emergent bilinguals or multilingual speakers, knowing that we want them not only to learn English, but of course, how do we ensure that we're fostering their culture and fostering who they are, and knowing that they can use that to help them become bilingual instead of EL, and the deficit perspective of what an English learner usually is. And so that's been my big emphasis right now. Is first we have to change the language and the way in which we define our students. And then from there, if we don't have that foundation, then we won't be able to correctly serve them in the classroom. So that's really been my emphasis this school year, is how do we start that? How do we build that foundation?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And to be honest, until I met you, I'd never heard of the term emergent bilingual. Can you kind of share with our viewers, what does that mean when you say emergent bilingual? And also, you also said that EL, that term is from a deficit mindset. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I just believe in our, when we look at emergent bilinguals, our linguistically diverse population continues to grow. And Dr. Ofelia Garcia coined the term emergent bilingual as students that are simultaneously acquiring a new set of linguistic capabilities in school while building on the valuable knowledge of their first language. Okay. So that's really what we want our students to do. And the reason why I say English learner come from that deficit perspective is because, across our country throughout history, and the way, we're different compared to Germany, compared to Europe, to where they're multilingual speakers, and it's really expected. We're here in the United States, we have students that come from another country, and they're expected to learn English. And in terms of, I think that's just the way that our culture in terms of linguistics can be in this country. I always look at a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jose Medina, always talks about the importance of being linguistic liberators, and how that, how different terms can coin our students and it could be linguistically oppressive, in which the way that we help our students. So if we are able to use this term emergent bilinguals, it's that asset-based perspective, and it helps our teachers become more attentive and value our students' language, and also help them understand that, our language, students' language, directly connects to their culture. And metacognitively, there's thinking in their first language first, and how do those connections come together when we want them to learn? And also, their first language can be a tool to reach learning objectives.
Sure.
So those are really what I try to emphasize with the teachers that I work with, and helping them understand that, yes. And then right now in, the United States, we've used to have our Title III, which used to be, our bilingual education department. And then it's just all these different changes. Now we have the Office of English Language Acquisition. So to go from a bilingual in the federal government to go from a bilingual education, in the Department of Education to Office of English Language Acquisition, that just tells you the emphasis, even in our federal government, of, English is the goal for our students. And I'm not saying that we don't want to teach our students English. What I'm saying is, how do we use what our students have and know that's part of who they are to create the connections that is needed? So something that I really talk to my teachers about is, if they learn how to add in Spanish, if they learn how to add in Pashto, because we have a larger community of our Pashto speakers from Afghanistan here, if they learn how to add in that language, if you just give them the language, they're going to know how to add in English. Once you give them the language, the concepts transfer. It's just our job. We're the linguistic keys. I tell my teachers, we're the ones that are giving them the keys to create that connection. So that's really what I really try to harness with our families and with our teachers, to create those connections. And across the country, there are still 10 states that use, when they are working on in their states, they still use limited English proficient, LEP, that LEP term. And again, 10 states still use that when they are working in their audits and using that terminology. So if that terminology, again, is within their, in the state government, and, that type of language will transfer into the schools. So that's why I really wanted to use different terminology, and how do I spread that? And that's really what we worked on, even with the group, with what I worked with in the College of Education at K-State.
Yeah. So when you say emergent bilingual, are you only talking about students whose first language is another language other than English? Because when I think about my own blended family, my wife is from Colombia. My children are fluent in Spanish and English. So, I guess you could say, obviously, their mother tongue is Spanish because their mother's a Spanish person, but also they live in the United States, and I feel like they're fluent in both languages. How would they be classified, based on the different?
They'd be, bilingual in terms of they've already, that's that bilingual from birth idea, that they're already bilingual. And it's we call them emergent bilinguals because they have not quite learned the English language. Yeah. Okay. So, and then you have students that are emergent. You could call them, another term that is used by Dr. Jose Medina is emergent multilingual speaker, emergent multilingual, because, I have students right now, and here in USD 383 in our Manhattan Afghan resettlement team, the groups that came here, and they speak Pashto, they speak Dari, and some speak Persian. So now they're going to be, they can speak up to 3 languages now. So that's another term, emergent multilingual speaker. And I guess it's just really thinking about, how do we help our students understand that and families understand that their culture, their religion is just as important as learning English and the ways, because I think sometimes we see that acculturation and assimilation happen so fast. And again, it's no fault of the families, no fault. I think it's just the system that we work in, what we've been doing for years upon years, and how do we change that?
That's fair. I've been married now for 13 years, and it really bothers me when I see families or students in particular that don't take pride in their language and knowing their language. And you're right, it's systemic. It's not something that the family is saying that they want to get away from. I just think there's such an emphasis on English. And I'm like you, I'm not saying that students are going to learn English. If you live in this country, you will learn English, right?
They're going to learn it.
Yeah, you have to
live in the
learn
world
it.
of English. Yes,
absolutely. Exactly. And it's a benefit, even if they do eventually go back to their home country. But they should not be learning English at the expense of losing their cultural identity, their language, right? And so to me, I see that. I see where you have some people that might be from Mexico, for example, and they don't even speak Spanish. That doesn't make sense to me. But yet still their grandmother speaks it, or, all of their relatives speak it. That's very concerning to me. So I really like this conversation. I feel like it's super important for districts all across this country, whether we're talking about Kansas, New Mexico, where I'm at here in Seattle, like it should be something that's celebrated, encouraged, and championed, and not something that is looked at as, like you said, a deficit.
That's another I'm using now a lot too. And as I go into classrooms and trying to, we're on our steps of trying to help that tier one, our classrooms in the tier one, and we're trying to help them understand how we make language accessible? How are we ensuring that we're explicitly engaging our emergent bilinguals using our sheltered strategies. But that also includes, here we have our academic language word of the day or words that we're using. It's okay if we translate them in their language because they have to learn the concept. Absolutely. So helping them understand that, yes, we are teaching them the concept of English in English, but give them a word or something to hang on to from their first language to create that connection and that translanguaging. And people confuse code switching and translanguaging, where translanguaging is how do you use the languages to make that meaning. So that's really what I'm trying to help, again, broach that conversation of how do we use more of the languages in the classroom to create that connection. And I think that's just important across the country. And translanguaging is, a lot of people are using it more and more nowadays. So I'm glad that people are using that term more.
That's fair. So what is your vision, Dr. Latania? Because, obviously you're in Manhattan, Kansas, you're from New Mexico, but, when I hear you speaking, I hear this more nationwide vision than just Manhattan, Kansas vision.
Yeah, I've been inspired by, again, I use Dr. Federico Garcia, I've used, Dr. Medina. I just think my vision is to help our country and help our system become, how do I say this? When I started teaching in 2002, and then I continued my degree, continued my work in dual language education, I worked in a dream school. Dolores Gonzalez was probably the best school to ever work for to start. It's like, it's a treasure, but then it's kind of like a curse because you think that all schools are going to be that way or all systems are going to be that way. Yeah. And I worked in a school where we had such a great culture that we worked together. I worked with the teacher for 5 years as a, peer teacher. We had all these programs. It was in heaven, for the 10 years that I worked there. And I look at that school and I'm like, it's possible to have a Dolores Gonzalez elementary school all over the country. My vision is that schools and systems give bilingual education a try, give more opening up their mind and using our students' background and cultures to create a more inclusive districts. I know we're working on it little by little in the district that I'm working in. It's coming along, but nationwide, I think we have to go back to what it was like when I first started teaching. But again, that was 2002 to 2012. I taught there and I just was in a great place. And so I'm just wondering how I feel like we've, in terms of the way in which we think about language learning, the way we think about our country, sometimes I feel like we've gone back in time instead of progressed in the way that we have taught language in certain places. And I think skill-wise, we have to continue to move forward. I'm very happy with the Department of Education, how the new Department of Education Secretary, how he's really focusing in on bilingual education and the importance of dual language. So I'm hoping that more federal money will go to that. But again, I think it's just how do we change the mindset of understanding that our world is changing. Hispanic students are the largest racial or ethnic group in many states like New Mexico, California, Texas, Arizona. And again, people say, oh, minority, majority, we talk about that, but no, I don't like to use that. I think we had that discussion about, no, we cannot use minority anymore because there's nothing minor about our students. So so we have to talk about our diverse communities and how they're growing and how they're making up the bulk of our communities and how do we create that community cultural wealth. And you're really thinking about how do we help our students understand their community cultural wealth. And if teachers don't understand who our students are and where they come from, then it's hard for us to really understand them and help our students even understand their identity. Now that I work with grades 6 through 12, I taught English for 7 years. And working on my dissertation, I think that's the biggest thing. If we're not understanding who our students are, then how do we, now grades 6 through 12, how do we help them with their identity? So that's a big thing. I'm seeing that with my own children of adolescent ages and understanding who they are, where they come from.
Yeah. So speaking of that, both of your parents were educators. Did you fight that at first? getting into education because they were educators, or did you embrace?
I wanted to go into civil rights. I wanted to go into, first I wanted to be in the Air Force, and then I tore my ACL again, and that didn't work out. I wanted to be an officer in the Air Force. That's why I used to be a criminology major. And then when I moved back home to help take care of my grandmother, I changed to sociology because I was like, I don't see myself carrying a gun. It's just not me.
Yeah.
It was like, and then my parents were always educators. And so like, nope, I've always loved working with children. My father was a baseball coach from Kansas, moved to New Mexico where he met my mother. And he ended up staying there, becoming a football coach. He passed away when I was young. He was a math teacher. Okay. And then my mom, another passion I have is, again, our first generation, our non-traditional students, because my mom, she was a director of recruitment retention at a community college where she worked her whole life. So it's really a passion for me to help our students that feel like they don't have a chance or feel like they are behind or feel like they don't belong. So I think that the idea of belonging has been very important to me in my work.
That's fair. That's really good. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know your father was not here anymore.
Yeah, and I have my stepfather, actually, like my dad. He raised me since I was 10, but he was also a counselor in schools too. So it's,
wow.
Yeah. And then my aunt was a math teacher. So it's all over the place. Yeah. So
in the blood.
It's in the blood. Yeah. It's somehow. Yeah.
That's cool. Do you see your kids pursuing the same profession or?
I don't know. Actually, my oldest boy, he has this idea of going to college, playing college ball, and then he sees how a lot of the students stay on as, graduate assistants for the college team. So he would like to become a coach. That's what he would like to do, my oldest. Yeah. And then my daughter, I think eventually would like to become a teacher because she likes kids. So we'll see.
That's good. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Latania, if I didn't see you for the next 5 years, it's 2023. So if I didn't see you until 2028, what is Dr. Latania doing?
Good question. I would like to be an administrator. I'm working on my admin license.
Okay. Come on to Seattle. We plenty of opportunities.
Yeah. So you told me.
Yeah.
Finish my administration license. I like the Title I type roles. I would like to try as a administrator of Title III administrators, but I would like to be an administrator in a high school or have a consulting business and inspire people across the country and working on how do we change the language and how do I help schools really authentically create those partnerships with families using community cultural wealth. I think that, Terry so the framework of community cultural wealth is so deep that it can be, when they came up with the framework of community cultural wealth, it was really to use it to help our colleges understand first generation, our diverse groups, and how do our colleges understand community cultural wealth to be able to make those connections. And so she created this framework, and then it's been moved into different ways across in education. And that's how I used it, is understanding community cultural wealth for family engagement. So I'm slowly coming up with different ways to communicate that with my school district, but also with other school districts and others to help them understand how they can actually use it and make it part of how they communicate with families instead of using that same monocultural lens of what a school agenda defines as family engagement. So I would like to be a consultant as well. So that's what I plan to do.
Well, I will tell you what, Dr. Latania, I can definitely see greatness within you.
Thank you. I appreciate your inspiration.
No, 100%. I mean, and truthfully, as an administrator for the last 15 years, what you're sharing with me on the show is something that's needed, not just in Kansas where you're at, but all over this country. So I want to encourage you to definitely start your consulting business sooner rather than later, because I will tell you there's a lot of schools and school districts that would definitely, like you said, the demographics are changing. It's undeniable and it's no stopping it, right? Today, what you are sharing and what you could share to help districts, I think they would really appreciate it. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage you to do that. Obviously, still become an administrator, but consulting business might become a full-time deal.
I think so too. I'm really trying to work on it this year. Last year I finished my doctorate. I wanted a taste of what do schools in Kansas look like? How do I help here? And that's the biggest thing. Dolores Huerta is one of my biggest inspirations. And she was a teacher in California during the time when the farm workers were here. Well, they're still here, but during the time that the farm workers were, we had our boycotts, and she saw that her children were not coming with clothes and they weren't coming with shoes, but yet she saw their parents working hours upon hours in the field. So she's like, I can't educate hungry children, and I need to go and make I need to do something bigger. So I think that's why I decided to work on my doctorate, is because I wanted to have my doctorate and I wanted to do something bigger to help change a system and help change the way in which we work with our families and authentically engage with them to actually create those partnerships. And so she really inspired me. After knowing that story about her, she really inspired me. Her story inspired me to move further. So I want to make an impact. So that's really what I want to do with my understanding of the world and what I see in my experience.
That's awesome. Well, Dr. Latania, I want to thank you so much for coming on the My K12 Career Show and just sharing your story, your journey, your passion with our viewers and our listeners. But before you leave, would you please leave us with some parting words of wisdom? Tell us how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Sure. My biggest parting words, something that I use with my teachers and that I've used with students, is you learn the best in your discomfort zone. So as teachers, we have to be uncomfortable to look at our own biases and assumptions and to be able to learn how we can actually connect with our students. And we may be uncomfortable. It's just the way life is. So if we don't get into that discomfort zone, we're going to stay comfortable forever and never learn more. So we learn the most in our discomfort zone. So I guess I challenge teachers, I challenge students to, you may have to work a little harder. You may have to do some inner work to create those positive partnerships or to create that learning that you want. But I think it's important that we remember that we learn the most in our discomfort zone. Right. And so you can contact me I'm on LinkedIn, Latania Marr Y Ortega. I also have my Gmail account, which is Dr. Latania Marr Y Ortega, DRLATANIA, Marr, MARY, Ortega, ORTEGA @gmail.com. I know it's long, but I thought I had a.
Oh, it's no problem. We're going to put everything in the show notes. No worries.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think I had like a little card or something, but that's really my parting words. And we just need to stop looking through that monocultural lens of how we help our students grow and how we view our students. We have to stop looking at that monocultural lens. And again, it will be uncomfortable, but it's worth it.
I like it. I always say you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
You have to. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Latania, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. I can tell there's greatness within you. I know your future is 100% bright, and I look forward to continuing the conversation at some other time. So I definitely don't want this to be the last time you come on the show.
No, sir. We will continue to talk so we can collaborate with others as well to move this conversation forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right.
Blessings.